Hello my guys, welcome to what is probably one of the most positive videos that I make on this channel, where I'm going to be talking about my best books of the year so far. So if this is your first time tuning into my mid-year wrap-up content, the best books of the year so far video is a little bit different to my best books of the year overall, which will of course come at the end of the year. And that is because today I'm going to be talking about my best book of each month from January through June. So the reason why this is different is, for example, if I read 2 books in February, where maybe I enjoyed both of them more than a book that I read in June, the second book in February, the one that I liked the least out of the 2, is not going to be mentioned in this video. But you may see it in my best books of the year overall when we get to that point. So this is just a little moment to reflect on the year so far, reflect on everything I've read, and share with you the highlights of each month of the year so far. So we do actually have quite a mix of genres in this video, which is interesting. There are some years, I think 2023 was potentially a year where I had an eclectic mix of genres. We tend to have mostly like epic fantasy and also some fantasy romance in my best books, which is also represented here. But we actually have a little bit more contemporary romance than I feel like has been typical in recent years. So of these 6 books I'm talking about today, 2 of them were 4-star reads and 4 of them were 5-star reads. I've actually only given 4 5-star ratings so far this year, which I actually think is a little better than where I was at this time last year, if you can believe it. So these are not necessarily all going to be some of my best books of all time, just what I have enjoyed the most so far. And I do have some pretty big anticipated releases coming up in the second half of the year, which I am, fingers crossed, hoping are going to end up ranking in my best books of the year overall video. And if you want to see what those are, you can go ahead and check out my anticipated releases for the second half of the year video that I've posted pretty recently on my channel. But getting into the books, my favorite book of January was one of those contemporary romances, and it was one of the 2 4-stars, and that is The Deal by Elle Kennedy, which is the first book in the Off-Campus series. So this one has been a hyped book for pretty much as long as I have existed in the book internet spaces, and so I was a little bit trepidatious going into this one because I was worried with it being a contemporary romance, a new adult romance from 2014 or 2015, that I was potentially not going to enjoy it as much as I would have if I'd have read it like closer to its publication. But I was actually very pleasantly surprised by this one. This one is a hockey romance, which I'm not a sports girly. I actually don't really like any sports at all. So I like fitness, but I don't like sports. So I didn't think a sports romance would be for me either. But this is the first book in a series of hockey romances. This one in particular is following Hannah, who is your average student. She is very intelligent. She excels in all of her classes. But in terms of being known around campus, like, she pretty much keeps to herself. However, that is until Garrett Graham gives her an offer that she cannot refuse because she has a crush on a star football player. Garrett notices this and offers to fake date her so that she can build up some credibility, a little bit of popularity, and gain the attention of this football star. And all he wants in return is for her to choose him in a class that he is failing. For the longest time, she refuses him up until he eventually wins her over, and those two start to grow closer and closer through the process of Hannah tutoring him. So this is one, because of when it was published and because of how popular it was and the type of book that it was, I expected it to be like quite angsty and problematic, and we definitely have a level of angst in here, but I feel like all of the serious topics that this book deals with were actually handled incredibly well. This also contains one of my favorite romance tropes, which is the he fell first trope, which is essentially where the love interest, typically the male love interest, is way more into the main character than she is into him. I particularly like it as well when the main character is completely oblivious and has no idea that the love interest is actually into her, and this checked all of the boxes in that regard for me. It did have a level of angst and drama that I do enjoy, but without pushing it too far into it being incredibly unrealistic, and I really liked the sexual tension and the build in here, which recently with romance in the last like couple of years, I have started to realize that more and more I just have no attachment to the actual romances in books books at all. So when they hit for me, they really hit and earn them a spot on my best books of the year list. Speaking of contemporary romance, there is one woman who can do no wrong, and my favorite book of February was Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood. So Ali Hazelwood is a 5-star author for me. This is my 4th Ali Hazelwood book that I've read and my 4th 5-star rating that I've given. I didn't actually expect to love this one as much as the other Ali Hazelwood books I've read, which is the first 3 of the Steminist novels, because this is her young adult romance. So at this point, I've kind of grown out of young adult. There are specific things that I do still enjoy when I read young adult, but as a whole, it is not something that I go out of my way to pick up. However, when it's Ali Hazelwood, I do make an exception, and this was no exception in the Ali Hazelwood string of compelling romances that I just become obsessed with. So this one is following Mallory, who is a chess whiz, and her father was heavily involved in the chess world. I think that he was a champion, or he competed in a lot of tournaments. Mallory kind of wanted to follow in his footsteps at one point. However, her dad's not around anymore, and it is very unclear throughout the majority of this book what exactly her dad has done, what has happened to him. But what is clear is that Mallory very much blames chess for it. So since then, she has stopped playing, but her mother is chronically ill, which means that she cannot work consistently to provide for the family, and Mallory has 2 younger sisters. So she tells her mum that she's not going to college because she doesn't want to go, and she plans to work full-time to help to pay the bills and help to support their family. She's also slipped into this parental role with her sisters that is causing tension between them, and her sisters are like deep in puberty. So there is a lot of tension in this household, and one day Mallory's best friend invites her to go to this charity chess tournament and kind of begs her to go because she knows that Mallory's good at chess and it's just for fun, it's just to help out. She begrudgingly goes, and without knowing, she ends up sat across from the #1 chess player in the world, Nolan Sawyer, and she beats him, and this makes her a media sensation. Everyone is trying to recruit her, everybody wants to know about the only person who's been able to beat Nolan, and she eventually goes to work for, I don't really know what you would call them because I don't know a lot about chess. Everything I know about chess I learned from this book. The synopsis doesn't tell me, but she ends up going to work at like this chess club where they are essentially going to train her to play chess because her knowledge of chess is very instinctual. Like, she doesn't know the theory behind it. So they are going to essentially like sponsor her and train her to play chess competitively and pay her a lot to do it. So Mallory goes along with this because her family needs the money and it pays incredibly well. But as she gets deeper and deeper back into the world of chess, she starts to rediscover her love for the game, as well as potentially her growing attraction to the current reigning chess champion. I did not know how much sexual tension chess could provide until I read this book. Let me tell you, like, it got me interested in chess in a way that I have never been before, which I know the show Queen's Gambit did for a lot of other people. But the way that Ali Hazelwood can so perfectly build tension, even in places where you would expect there to be none. Like, if you asked me what the sexiest sports are in the world, I don't think chess would be in my like top 50 if I'm being honest. But Ali Hazelwood really changed the game on that for me. She once again continuously writes like he falls first kind of romances where the love interests are head over heels for the main characters, and the main characters are so locked into their own personal stuff that they can't see this man like 2 feet in front of them. And I think that that is why I love Ali Hazelwood. I've spoken on my channel recently about different romance author and different kind of books that are kind of repetitive. Like, if you like the thing that they do, if you like that blueprint, you are going to continuously love the books that they provide. Whereas if that is not your thing, like it isn't for me a lot of the times, like it can become quite tedious and repetitive. Ali Hazelwood is my blueprint. Like, a lot of her relationships are very, very similar, but I eat them up time and time again and continue to give them 5 stars. My favorite book for March is my favorite book in John Gwynn's Faithful and the Fallen series so far, and that is actually Valor. I know a lot of people really like Ruin, but Valor for me is where I really started to get interested in this series, and this is quite a low 5-star. I do really enjoy this series, but John Gwynn so far is not one of my very, very favorite fantasy authors, while I will continue to read all of the books that he's published so far based on my experience of this series. But if you guys don't know about the Faithful and the Fallen in general, it's set in the Banished Lands, and John Gwynn actually has 2 series that he's written in this world so far. But it is a world where there was a historic war between giants and men, and we're so far removed from this now that a lot of the regular people of the world consider this to be like lore and legend. But there is a prophecy in this world that actually originates from from the time of giants that says that a black sun and a bright star are going to emerge and the world is going to split in half to rally behind them. The bright star and the black sun are going to be avatars for the two gods of this world that have been in kind of like this perpetual war that we never really see but kind of forms the mythology of this world. The god of light, Elyon, turned away from humanity after subduing the god of dark and has abandoned them, and they're kind of waiting for his to return, which, like I said, forms the basis of the mythology. And this is a large cast fantasy series where we are following a lot of the key players in bringing this prophecy into fruition, and also the people who are kind of the victims of the prophecy getting swept along with it. The first book, which is this book, what is book 2? So the first book, Malice, is setting everything up, like getting us to know our characters and where the world currently sits in peacetime, before at the end of book 1 going into book 2 everything is thrown into turmoil as the world starts to separate and this prophecy starts to actually come into fruition. So the reason why I liked Valor so much is kind of like it's the first book in the series where things are actually happening. I do often compare the structure of this series to Game of Thrones in that the plot only actually starts at the end of book 1. So when you get into book 2, you're starting to see the intricacies of the plot. It actually gets a lot more magical because, like I said, the characters think that the giants and the magic is all like lore and legend, and it's actually coming into reality in this book, and you start to see the extents of the world and the history that has been forgotten and the communities of giants that have been in hiding because they've been shunned from society. And as the series goes on, it becomes more and more magical, which is actually also really similar to Game of Thrones and also The Realm of the Eldlings by Robin Hobb, which is actually probably my favorite epic fantasy series or world, I guess, because there's like 5 series in that overall. So the reason why I enjoy this one so much is that we truly see the scope of the world. The plot starts to ramp up, it gets more magical, the politics get spicier, and it all just becomes more expansive, but in a very natural way where it doesn't become overwhelming and everything makes perfect sense in context of the world. Something that I do really love about John Gwyn's books as well is that they are a mix of the tone of things like Game of Thrones, which I feel can be quite cold in its narration. I don't feel it is a very emotionally charged writing style that George R.R. Martin has, and it kind of blends that level of action and that style of plot with something a little bit more emotive, like Robin Hobb's writing style in The Realm of the Eldlings, where you really become attached to the main character. So what that creates for me in this series is a very expansive, rich world with a very intricate plot, but characters that you can root for, and so you are deeply emotionally invested in their journey. And John Gwyn does not pull his punches, so you are going to be upset. I've cried actually in every single one of the books I've read in this series. My favorite book of April is potentially my favorite book of the year so far, and that is Heavenly Bodies by Amani Ariu. The sequel to this is out, I think, right at the end of the year. Once again, check that anticipated releases video, but I would very much actually like to reread this one before I dive into that, because I had such a good time with it, but I also would like to reread it and savor it a little bit more. But this one is the first book in a fantasy romance series set in a world that is based on celestial bodies and the zodiac and all of that kind of jazz, which going into this I was worried that that would be really gimmicky. Like, as somebody who loves astronomy, astrology, the stars and all of that kind of stuff, I really thought it was going to be all aesthetic, no substance, and Amani Ariu proved me wrong. So this one is following a girl who was born in a kingdom of dark, and there is a prophecy surrounding her that says that she is going to fall in love with a star and it is going to cause the death of them both. So a star, who is like a magical being, travels to the country where she's from, kills her family and seizes control of her kingdom. She actually manages to escape in all of this, and she ends up being kidnapped and taken to the Kingdom of Light, which is actually a enemy kingdom to her own. They have been not necessarily at war, but they have been attacking each other's borders, and the relationship between them is like fraught with tension. But she is taken to the king of this kingdom, who wants to train her to take out this star before this star gets a little bit too power hungry and turns his attention towards this Kingdom of Light. So our main character begrudgingly agrees, because obviously she wants nothing more than to take her revenge for the death of her parents and the capture of her kingdom. So the king puts her into training with his son, who who is essentially like his best general. There is a lot of animosity between these two because they are from enemy kingdoms, and our main character assumes that Enzo, the king's son, is going to be as harsh and bigoted as his father. However, it turns out that that is maybe not the case. So the reason why I loved this one in a way that I haven't loved a lot of romantasy I've read recently is that it does have that intricate plot. It had a plot twist actually that I didn't see coming, which I really loved. The world is really well fleshed out and three-dimensional. Like I said, I was worried it would be all aesthetic, no substance, but I actually feel like Imani Arayu did such a good job with the world building that it did feel like super realistic and immersive, which is what I need in a fantasy world. And then we had this really stunning slow burn romance, which is my favorite, full of like longing. There's a bit of a taboo relationship. They're from enemy kingdoms. They also need to keep their eye on the prize. And then the plot developments that we had towards the end of the book that I thought that Imani Arayu disguised very well just was the little cherry on the cake for me. So this is currently my favorite book of the year. There's a couple of books coming out towards the end of the year that might shake it off its top spot, but I definitely think that this is going to stay up there for the rest of the year. My best book of May was probably the biggest surprise out of this list, but honestly it's not that deep, but it was an instant 5-star, and that is The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden. Now, I do not often give thrillers 5 stars because thrillers often disappoint me, and it is not their fault. It is my unrealistic expectations. So for me to give a thriller a high rating, it has to have the most shocking plot twist that I never saw come in but makes absolute perfect sense. And a lot of thrillers aren't designed to do that. Like, that is not their purpose. That is not what they are even attempting to do. But when they don't do it because of my unrealistic expectations, I still get disappointed. This actually managed to achieve it, and for that, it was an instant 5-star read for me. So Frida McFadden is a very popular, very well loved, and to some people well-hated thriller author, and I had never read anything from her. I received this in a PR package from Source Books, and I was like, cool, because I don't read a ton of thrillers. I really like them to spice up my reading, but I don't really look at reviews or even the synopses. I just grab whatever thriller is closest to me, and that's the one that will do. So I was really glad that I could try Frida McFadden out because I'd heard lots of like crazy and wonderful, sometimes not so wonderful things, and this one definitely did not disappoint. I'm very, very open to reading more from Frida McFadden. So this one is following a woman who lives in New York City. She's in her 30s. Her mother is constantly pressuring her to get married and have kids. And as she lives in the city, dating is not easy. And one day after this terrible date, she meets this guy who kind of saves her from this awful date who's getting a bit handsy. They go their separate ways, and at first she doesn't really think anything of it. And then she decides that this is a mixed connection and she would actually really like to try and find this guy. However, she is promptly distracted when one of her friends is murdered. And the police have no idea who has killed her friend, but they do know that there is a guy going around who is dating the women that he kills before he kills them. After a little bit of time has passed, she actually runs into this guy that she met outside her apartment building again, and they start to hit it off. They start dating, but the longer that she dates him and the more that he isn't really letting her into his life, the more she grows suspicious of him. And we actually follow 2 timelines in this book. That one is the present timeline, but the past timeline is from the perspective of this guy that our main female character is dating when he is a teenager, and it is following him with his first crush, who is this girl called Daisy, who he's obsessed with. Like, he thinks she's stunning, she's beautiful, she has a sparkling personality, and he also really, really wants to kill her. What I've told you is all laid out in the synopsis, and for the longest time I was reading this book and I was like, okay, this is going pretty much exactly the way that I expected it to based on the synopsis. And I was like, is it gonna do anything? Is it just gonna tell me this story in an entertaining way? Because Frida McFadden has super compelling writing. Like, I was eating this up even though it was just narrating the synopsis, and like I said, I like me a twisty thriller. So I was going through like, everything is going exactly the way as I expected it to based on what I've read on the back of this book. When the plot twist came, it hit me like a truck. Like, I literally never saw it coming. Everything clicked into place and my viewpoint was changed. I was actually going to unhaul this book because I don't often keep thrillers. I read them, I enjoy them in the moment, probably not going to reread them when I know the plot twist. So I tend to unhaul them, but I've saved this from my unhaul pile and I've put it on my shelves when I was doing a rearrange recently, because I'm not necessarily saying that I'm going to revisit this ever again, but I feel like this experience of reading this and being shooketh to my core at the plot twist is something that is going to stay with me for a very long time, and I want to keep the book to remember that, but I also do see myself definitely picking up more Freedom McFadden books in the future. And my most recent favorite from June is our other 4-star of this video, and I was actually very torn between two books. Very different books, but ones that I enjoyed pretty equally. But for this one, I think I'm going to go with Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinnerman, because as soon as I finished this one, I went directly into book 2. I had such a good time. So this is a book that is very hyped at the minute. A lot of people are reading it. A lot of people are loving it. Has a very high average rating. I did not give this one 5 stars. I gave it like a 4.5, like quite a high 4. There were a couple of things that I did not love about it, but overall I had an amazing time with the audiobook of this one, which was very well produced. So Dungeon Crawler Carl is a lit RPG, which is essentially a book that is kind of narrated in the style of a video game. So imagine you are playing something like World of Warcraft or Skyrim, and your character is aware that they are in a game, but the story is narrated from their perspective. So they know they have a mini-map, they have a quest log, they can level up and they can gain skills, and they are playing the game fully aware that it is a game, even though it has a level of reality to it for them, and like death is a very high risk. So in Dungeon Crawler Carl, we are following, you guessed it, Carl, whose girlfriend is cheating on him, and she has gone away with this man that she's cheating on him with, and that is kind of when he's found out what she's doing. So he's sat at home in her apartment looking after her award-winning like Persian cat, and because she has no respect for their relationship, he has no respect for their apartment anymore, so he started smoking inside. However, the cat hates the smell, so he's been cracking the window, and one day at 2 a.m. the cat leaps out of the window and he runs out to go rescue her when all of the buildings on Earth just collapse and anyone who's in them is squashed and they're dead. And he is obviously like, what is going on? When this disembodied voice comes from the ether and tells him that he now has 2 choices. The first choice is that he can live on the surface of the Earth if he wants with whatever resources are left, but it is the middle of a winter storm. He's out there in his boxers, some pink Crocs and a leather jacket, and he has no shelter. Or he can go into the stairwells that are going to open up underground and he can join this intergalactic game show. So he picks up his cat, Princess Donut, and he wanders on down into this dungeon where he becomes a dungeon crawler, and the entire galaxy is watching this unfold. It is, to me, it's like a mashup between Ready Player One and The Hunger Games, with the dungeon forming the arena aspect of The Hunger Games, and Ready Player One forming, I guess like the competition is more like the Ready Player One competition, and then you also have the like video game element to Ready Player One, which actually Ready Player One is one of my favorite books of all time. And you have all of the elements of a video game in here. So he levels up, he gains achievements, he has access, like I said, to his minimap, his quest logs, and this is like the event of the galaxy. So everyone is watching. You can have sponsors and patrons like in the Hunger Games, where you'll get exceptional loot that you can't get any other way from gaining these people's favor. You can be viewed by everyone because it's kind of like interactive. You can have followers, and every night they do a recap like they do at the Hunger Games, where they show the highlights of the past 24 hours in the dungeon. So I really like all of these game elements of it. I have read a lit RPG in the past and it kind of got a little bit repetitive with like the level up notifications and the achievements, which is present in Dungeon Crawler Carl as well. But I feel like the tone and the little bit of humor and the way that this is also, because it's set in our world, there is a level of like critique on society and also satire present in this book that is quite amusing. And I like the way that it's poking fun at things in modern day society. Like one of the bosses they face is called the Juicer and he's a gym bro. So I like the way that it's blended like this sci-fi fantasy and also the real world. There is a touch of the male gaze in this book, and the humor can be a little bit crass for me at times, which is why it didn't get a full 5 stars. But the audio production is really something special, and I think a combination of that with me also being a gamer, so being able to appreciate the game elements and the parallels to the real world with the sci-fi elements of this intergalactic game show going on in the background of the dungeon itself, it was definitely a win for me, and I'm excited to carry on with the series. What I'm hoping for from the series now is a little bit of a wider plot, which I mean, there's 7 books released with an 8th to come, and they get quite chunky, so there's plenty of scope for that to happen as we get deeper into the dungeon. But book 1 is pretty much like an introduction, a fun romp through a dungeon, and if the plot continues to expand from there, then this one is definitely going to be even more of a hit for me in the future. I am going to wait until Dungeon Crawler Carl comes out in paperback though to get physical copies if I do, because I'm not paying like £20+ per hardback for those when there's 7 of them already already released. But these are my favorite books, plus Dungeon Crawler Carl, of course, of 2025 so far. Down in my comments, let me know if you have particularly enjoyed any of these, or if you haven't read any of them, then let me know your favorite book of the year so far, because I would love to know and also get some more recommendations, of course. But if you guys would like to let me know you were here but you don't feel like you have anything to say, is there a tie emoji? Can you leave me a tie emoji or like a suit for the boyfriend? If you are here for the mid-year content, then stay tuned, because the next video you are going to get from me, I'm pretty sure, is the first part of my mid-year series check-in, where we're going to be talking about all of the series I have DNF'd, I have completed, and I'm currently up to date on at this point in 2025 so far. And if you've missed it, I have already posted my mid-year book freakout tag, which also celebrates my booktube anniversary. But aside from that, guys, please don't forget to like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you wanna. If you head to my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, my Instagram, and my Patreon if you would like to follow me on any of those. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you will go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.